let's move along to what we call light commercial searches. Not everybody that is a residential title searcher does commercial properties. I think that is a huge oversight and a huge opportunity for searchers. As a company that hires abstractors regularly to do searches, when we have a commercial property in an area where we don't do it ourselves, it's very difficult to find an abstractor who does commercial searches. And when we do searches ourselves, we find that in reality the search is not much different. It's a little harder, a little more complicated, but it's the same logic. You may have to search a few more places. Most highly qualified and experienced residential abstractors can do a commercial on most light commercial properties, maybe up to 200, 500, 700,000, depending on the area, where the ownership is relatively simple and it's not really complex. A few extra things you have to look at. The legal descriptions are usually more complicated. You may have carve-outs for out parcels or different types of easements. That's not something that can't be overcome. You can look at that and figure it out in some time. You have to look at corporation LLC records. Who are the principals? Sometimes the client may want to know if they have recordings individually against them that may affect the property. UCC filings for business fixtures. Sometimes the client's going to want to know if there's UCC filings for tenants on the building. Or if there are UCC filings, to know if they're for the tenant property or for the owner property, or both. That's something that, again, you want to find out the scope of the search, not just go by, it's a commercial search. Find out what the client really wants. Even if it's an underwriter. Sometimes underwriters have leeway and flexibility on what they need to underwrite their policy on commercial. I can tell you right now that a lot of policy underwriters have a tough time finding commercial searchers. It's not easy to do for them. As you're doing commercial searches, a couple things to take a look at and be aware of. Number one is when you look at the documents and who signed them, you want to make sure that the signers match the corporation. Does that corporation have requirements for real estate transactions? Some corporations have it in their charter. If it's a real estate transaction, all officers have to sign. Or there has to be a corporate resolution for that transaction. And if there is, you have to make sure that that resolution exists, whether it's recorded or not. You have to back that up. Sometimes it requires a vote of the corporation to buy a property or to finance a property or mortgage a property. So when you have a mortgage on a commercial property, you may want to check to see if the corporate filings or the corporate requirements require a corporate resolution, a vote. Do you get the minutes for the vote? What does the client want? But those are things to keep in mind. We've seen some mortgages that have been invalidated because the corporate structure didn't allow for that corporation to finance the property unless there was a vote with a quorum and the right number of people and everything else. So that's something else to keep in mind. One thing to also remember is, depending on who your client is, it might be important to find out what the search is for. Is it for a closing? Is it for a policy? A lot of commercial search inquiries you will get will be for uses other than the traditional closing policy use. And if it is, you want to find out what it's for two reasons. It might help you figure out what to do on the search or what things you may not have to do on the search. Sometimes they may not need civil court records for the principals. Sometimes they do. The other thing is, if you find out what it's for, you may get a call from XYZ insurance company. I need a title search on this commercial property. Can you do it? Oh, yeah, okay, I'll do it, and everything else. You do the search, you send it to them, you get paid, everything's fine. You may discover that that type of company regularly buys commercial title searches. And if you discover that, you can find more companies like them that do the same thing. So if you find out the reason why they are getting the search, you may discover other areas of business that previously were hidden. And especially with commercial, you'll find that a lot of the search orders are coming for reasons outside the typical policy closing type needs that the real estate industry has. Same thing with commercial. Hourly pricing is best if you can do it. If it's a light commercial, you can probably quantify the amount, but clients are more used to hourly pricing. I'm going to give you another lead for commercial searches. There's a company called Terracon. They're a national contracting, property management type company. They order a lot of commercial searches, usually longer chains, 50-year searches, sometimes with the intervening record, sometimes without. But they look for good quality abstractors nationwide, and they're a good company to do business with. They do not pay up front, but they pay. They're a really good company. When you're looking at the individuals on a commercial search, whether the partners or whatnot, also take a look at, are there partitions of rights? Sometimes on a commercial property, it's not just owned by the corporation, it's owned by the corporation, but individual partners have partitions of obligations to mortgages or partitions of rights of the ownership. Sometimes there's syndications of the property among a group of people. Those are more complicated to search because then you have to determine the relationship of the people. It's nothing that can't be figured out by looking at it, analyzing it, and studying the searches or the documents you look at. A good way to get involved with any of these searches is to just run a search. Pick a random property out of the phone book or off the assessor's records. Run what you think a search would look like. If you have a colleague or a business associate that that is qualified, that can do these kind of searches, give them what you did and say, what do you think? Is this right? Even if you got to pay them. Even if the first couple searches you do for a client, you have a trusted associate look at, and even if you have to pay them, you don't make as much money on the first few. You're getting your foot in the door of that industry. Even if you get an inquiry from a client who wants to do a search on a $3 million property that you're not ready to do, why not, instead of just saying we can't do it, why not find somebody who can do it, even if you know them or not know them? Say, look, I'm going to give you this piece of business, but I want to shadow you and do it. Maybe you can get them to pay you a little bit to help pull documents or do part of it. You're going to figure out how to do the search, just like we all did when we started doing basic residential searches. It's the same exact process. But I can guarantee you, it won't take that long to develop the depth for the commercial searches versus residential. What kind of questions does anybody have on commercial properties? Is anybody doing commercial properties now? Most everybody. Okay, it's good. Does anybody run into situations where the client isn't exactly clear what they want for the search? Almost everybody. That's what I thought it was just me. I guess it's not. That's why it's really important to find out what the scope of the search is. And I have to tell you, it's also a big opportunity. If the client doesn't know what the scope of the search is, don't put it on them to wait for them to figure it out. Tell them what you think the scope of the search should be. Say, this is what I think you should do. And make it an advantage to you. Make it a more complicated search. Make it a more profitable search. Because you're doing a client a service too, because you're getting them what you know they want. If the client doesn't know what they want, they're not only calling you to do the search, they're calling you for advice and expertise and consulting. And that's worth something to them too, and you should earn something for that as well.